You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com. On the website, you'll be able to find past Beardcasts and other blog posts that we have up there. You can also click the Buy Stuff item and pick up a few items to support the podcast. But we thank you for listening, and you hope you enjoy our show today. You're listening to The Bell Has Sung, and so you are listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week, as we were whiteboarding what we were going to talk about today, we kind of discovered this whole idea of kind of neediness of our soul. And I stumbled across this John Ortberg quote that says, "Our soul begins to grow in God when we acknowledge our basic neediness." So, Zach, as you think about that, and as you think about spiritual journey and all that, how does that all shape out and play out for you?
You know, it comes down to just what are our basic necessities in our relationship with Christ. And so when I look at my own life, we talk about spiritual gifts a lot, or what fills us up, or and for me, it's there's a couple things that I have to have. I have to have community. That's kind of my basic neediness with God, as I need people that I can surround myself with and just be with, be in the space, be together, have conversations, whether it be through worship or through just that very thing, having conversations. Those things feed me, and more so than a lot of the other spiritual practices that I've tried or done, or kind of what's I don't know, but that's what it is for me. It's finding that basic, what are my basic necessities? What are the food and water that I have to have that bring me closer to God? And then what are the other things that are dessert, right? That are great to have, but I don't have to have them. And so that's for me what I kind of look at in this neediness for God, just in what fills me there. But then I go to that other place of why do I need God? Kind of that infancy of being really needy and clingy, and what brings me closer to God, and that desire and passion just to be in God's presence. And I think it's just an overwhelming sense of maybe belonging. Maybe that's not even the right word. Not calmness, but just presence. Just the overwhelming sense to be present. Which is fun because that's behind me over here. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that. What about you, Matt?
So I've been thinking about what you said, and thinking about the reading. The John Ortberg quote comes out of this really great book, Soul Keeping, and we can't begin, like, you think of a plant begin to grow, and it can't grow until it gets nutrients to grow. And I think about our connection to God, and for me, like, I've noticed as of late, the more that I dive into theology, or some kind of theological work, or anything that I'm looking at can make that connection, or can make that my soul grow. And whether that's going on a mission trip, or diving into the Word. On Wednesdays I have a Bible study that meets at 6:30 in the morning, and I have to be honest with you, like, me waking up at 5:45 in the morning is not something I want to do. But what I've discovered is that by doing this, I've gotten to meet with a great group of men that has just been phenomenal, good to grow with in my faith and in their faith. And then for me, the big thing has been I think one of the things that we've forgotten to do is to feed our soul. But I think we screw up soul with feeling. And that when we feel like we're filled, it's the good makes me feel good feeling. That doesn't necessarily what the soul is. It's our whole self. It's not just that feeling of good, because let's be honest, sometimes I'm happiest when things just are, hitting the fan. and it may not be like a perfect day, but man, I feel,
Right.
hey man, it's going great. I don't care. The world's crashing down on me,
Right.
but yet, my soul resides in the Lord, and I feel all right. But, there are times where like I'm happy and I'm like, oh, I just don't feel fulfilled. And I think that we confuse the two. I think that the soul is that thing, that spiritual self that drives us, that connects us to God and to others, and has that deeper meaning. And it's not just, man, I feel really good. We sang victory in Jesus, and it makes me feel all happy, and that connects me to God. I think that that's some of it, but I don't think it's all of it, because the fullness that we need is acknowledging that basic need of we need God in our lives more than we ever really fully understand and realize. And I think that once we accept that, it feeds our soul and it stretches us and it helps us grow. And, we want to keep doing that. So we keep trying to do things and meditate and be in God's presence. And I think that takes, to grow it, I think it takes work. It's not something that just happens.
Well, and that's the thing. So we talk a lot about when we plan worship, or when we sit down and we look at a worship service or an event or whatever. I don't know that I know people outside of our offices and worship teams and things don't understand what it takes to plan worship. There's a lot of moving pieces there, and there's a lot that goes into it, because we're trying to answer this question of how do we, when people walk through our doors and come to worship, how do we give them the opportunity to worship with their whole selves? And there's a lot of pieces that go along with that. And the more that I sit in churches and in coffee shops and in bars and in cars with people, in airplanes and in airports, wherever I encounter people, I hear more and more of that. When I go here, this is how I worship with my whole self. When I'm doing this, it's not just warm and fuzzies. It's not just everything being good and being happy. It's being in the presence of God, wherever that may be. And sometimes that is in a worship service. Sometimes that's outside on a hike, and sometimes that's sitting in a bar with people and talking about Jesus. But it's giving people the opportunity to do that very thing, to worship with their whole selves, and not just try to pick on those warm and fuzzies. Those aren't bad, but that's not the end. That's not it. There's so much more. And I think it takes coming into just that honesty of, hey, here's where I'm at today. Maybe a great day, it may not be, but here I'm at. I'm going to be here, and this is going to be whatever it is. And just allow ourselves to be in those moments.
Well, and I think that's where, so I've been really reflecting on the membership vows in the United Methodist Church a lot lately, based on different conversations and different other things that I've dealt with in the last few weeks. And, when you join the church in a local congregation, we ask the question, do you agree to support the church by your prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness? There's one thing I think that's missing in that study. Because I don't think you can say that study falls underneath presence,
right?
Because you can show up to a Bible study and not learn a thing.
Sure.
You can show up to a small group and not have any conversation. You can be the great introvert and just sit there in your own little la-la land. And I really think that, to me, the more we dive into Scripture and have those conversations, and this has been a more recent thing for me. It hasn't been something that, I didn't grow up a Bible thumper. It's not something that I was reared in. So don't read into that like I'm being all, Baptisty and saying, it's got to be the King James Version and thumping it and having a nice Bible flicking thing.
This is still a Methodist podcast.
And I was a Methodist before I was a Methodist, and I could tell that story a little bit later. But for me, I really feel like the more I've dived into Scripture, and it's not just when I'm preaching on Sunday mornings, the more I've been feeling fulfilled, and I like going outside and doing those things too, and that does make a part of a connection. But to feel whole, you got to have a little bit of everything. And to me, see, that's why church is important. And I know there are people
Mm-hmm.
that say, well, I don't need to go to church to feel spiritually filled. Okay, that's half right.
Mm-hmm.
I can agree with you on that one, but I would also say that there's something about pointing all of our points, or all of our aches and pains and joys and concerns to God in a community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's just something about that man, we've been doing it for a very, very long time, and that ain't going away. And I don't care
Right.
what people say, it will look different, but it's we're not worshiping like they were when Jesus was around either.
Right.
And so I think that we have to make that connection, and I think it starts with prayer. But I also think you connect it in with scripture, and then asking yourself the question, when do I feel most with God? And
Mm-hmm.
there is a sense of times of renewal. Every year when I go to sixth grade camp, that renews me, even though it wears the crap out of me. There is something that just gets my, yeah, man, it was awesome. It was a great week. Who cares if we sent 3 kids to the emergency room and, half the camp's on fire, but man, there was something spiritual about it. And so, I think reflecting on it, and that's where John Wesley's question is, how is it with your soul?
Mm-hmm.
Really points us in that direction of bringing it full circle and asking ourselves, how have we been active? How have we had a relationship with God? And because if we reach out to God, God runs to us.
Right.
And so I want to encourage you this week to ask yourself that question, how is it with your soul? But I also think to take it even further and ask yourself, how are you connecting with God to make yourself feel whole? And
Right.
that's whole. That's not just filling one pocket. It's filling your whole self.
It is. And, Jesus talked about, mind, body, and spirit, or mind, body, and soul. That's our whole self. If we could easily take each of those and break them down in their own individual podcasts. But mind, body, and soul, that's a big space. That takes a lot. That's your whole self, like you say. And you're right. Study's huge. We have to dig deep. We have to go in, and however the ways that you do that. Wesley was big on acts of mercy and piety, which are both individual and communal. The community is huge. We have to find those places where we do get to come together, but we have to find those places where we feed ourselves individually as well. It can't be all about one thing.
Well, and I think that's the biggest problem we've fallen into.
Yeah.
And especially Christianity, is it's either one or the other. You're either hyper involved in self-study and self-prayer, or you're hyper involved in group studies and doing all the group things that you forget the personal self. And so you're not filling up your cup, filling up others. And I think the fullness is doing both. And that's a balance. And, God asks us to love our neighbor and to love God and to love ourselves. And that's even, we obviously don't do that well either. And I think, I think the more we work at it, and I think of exercising, although you and I are definitely not exercising aficionados. And in theory, I've YouTubed a couple of videos to see how to exercise and to do a couple of things, but that ain't working. But I think that we know that in order for us to be healthier, we're going to eventually have to get off our butts and do some things. And I think that that's the same thing with our spiritual journey, is that sometimes we just need to be pointed in the direction of saying, this is where you need to go, and this is what you need to do. And so,
and maybe bringing that back full circle, because I've heard, you hear it all the time. Well, I'm just not being fed. Well, what are you doing? What are you doing to feed yourself? What are you doing to make sure you get fed? Because it's not the people in the church, and it's not the pastor, and it's not anybody else's responsibility to feed you. It's your responsibility. And so what are you doing to take care of that? Right.
And if you're looking for a good resource, would encourage you, Richard Foster's Celebration of, and that's actually something I'm going to work on this summer. I'm going to try to do a group with that this summer. So would encourage people to maybe take a look at that. And maybe that's something, maybe that's a future podcast of, we work through that together. We've got a lot of great content up on our website, Zach. We've been blessed to have a lot of friends and other people come on the show to talk about stuff and books. We've even had some really good podcasts this year thus far, and we'd encourage you to go back and look at those. Look all the way up until the middle of the first year of our podcast. Don't listen to the first ones, but anything else after that's really good. Would encourage you to do that. We made Shay Claiborne famous because of because of our podcast. He got in trouble with Liberty University because of us. We'll take full blame for that. Shane, you can come and pray with us anytime. You're more than welcome. Even Liberty University, if you want to come and pray with us, you're more than welcome to anytime.
They don't subscribe to the podcast.
Hey, if it gets people listening, that's that maybe it may change the world. But we want to give you thanks for listening, and we encourage you to go on our website and pick up a few items and buy some coffee mugs and all that great stuff on there, and share it with your friends. We've got some really great content out there we encourage you to listen to. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope that you share our content online through Facebook and social media, and we hope that you check out our Beardcast store at beardedtheologians.com and pick up some great Bearded Theologians gear. We hope you have a good day.